Hi, Stephen Pearce, Finance Director at Anglo American. I grew up in Melbourne and went to university there at RMIT. Started out, like probably a lot of CFOs did, in chartered accounting. Back in those days it was Arthur Young, which became Ernst & Young. Did stints in London. Most of my clients were resource-based clients, so it was an easy transition to move out of the chartered profession and into corporate life. But I've been in mining, oil and gas, infrastructure. It's a fascinating part of industry and have enjoyed the ride. Working in the resources industry, there's lots of them in terms of commodity price volatility, government policy, the impact of China. So they're everywhere. I think the one thing you have to do is try to really be in a stronger position as you can to be able to cope with those sort of challenges and volatility. But also data and technology. It's probably not something the mining industry has done that well over the decades, but is coming fast at it in terms of automation, whether that be of fleets, of drill rigs, all the way back through mine planning to financial systems. It's really going to change the way we work as a company. And certainly at Anglo American, I suppose we're trying to embrace that through what we call future smart sort of innovation. And that's really, I think, going to change the way we think about how we mine, but also how the operation area and the finance area interact. I think that'll be a major change for us as a company and as a finance division. Future smart mining, it's the way we're trying to think about the mine of the future. So whether that's from a sustainability and water usage perspective and changing the technology and how we process the minerals, to the way we think about planning the operations, community interaction. Clearly, the mining industry has an impact in the communities that we work in, and so thinking about how we set ourselves up to be more sustainable and successful, how we use technology, how we think about probably more of an industrial process to take out some of the variability, but also, I think importantly, using technology from other industries that hasn't traditionally been used in mining and then adapting that to a mining environment. I think that'll see that next round of breakthrough in technology that the mining industry really needs. I think what's important is really more the bigger picture about policy certainty. So companies live in a world where we make investment decisions that often have a multi-decade horizon. So anything that creates uncertainty from a policy, financial, sort of tax regime, fiscal, or the ability to move people can have an impact on our business and the way we think about investing. And really it's the corporates investing in growth and projects that ultimately will deliver growth for the economy. And so our role in that needs certainty around it. And so, the sooner we can get certainty from a Brexit point of view, how that feeds into trade relations is going to be important for us as a company. Immediately it won't have that much of an impact given where we work and how we work. It's probably more likely to be around the edges and how we move people around. I think probably the main thing is you have to accept in our industry things will be volatile, and so being able to cope with that volatility from a position of strength. So whether that's from a strong financial perspective, so a strong balance sheet, low gearing, but also having the physical balance sheet in good condition as well. So understanding your deposits, your position on the cost curve, and how markets are changing around you is a really important part of what we do in thinking about how we run the company and how we set the company up for success through good and bad times. The mining industry traditionally always has cyclical elements in it, and so you have to accept they'll be there and you have to set yourself up to manage through the cycle. I think being able to cope with the changing world around you, I suppose I often think about the CFO role in three core areas. So there's sort of the internal finance function and disciplines that you need to sort of sponsor and build within the organisation. There's your role as a group executive and how you influence across the organisation. And then there's also the way you present the organisation to the external markets, and being able to tread across all of those territories in a credible but hopefully positively influencing way. Probably some of the bigger challenges that you have as a CFO. I think, when you get to a CFO role, the one thing you've got to realise is you can't do it all yourself. And so you need to surround yourself with good people and good teams. And so, obviously technical skills play an experience, whether it be legal, accounting, tax skills, they're all important. But probably just as important is the people skills that come with that, and your ability to influence both within your teams, but also outside of your teams and across the organisation. And that's really, I suppose, what I look for, as much as that finance and technical background, is how the finance team is accepted, represented and asked into the operations. I think that really sort of shows whether the team's being successful. Well, fortunately at Anglo American, we're of a scale that allows us to bring people in through different elements of the finance function. So whether that be through graduate programs, through internal audit work streams, through M&A work streams, or through traditional accounting and reporting work streams, we've got all of those things open to us. But one of the best things we can offer is people can move across those functions and across geographies and across industries and business units. And that's, I think, one of the great things that I've enjoyed as part of my career, is that ability to grow as part of those international transfers, to learn to live and work in another country, and then bring those skills back to different roles as you move up and on in your career. And I think that's one of the great things that Anglo American offer from a financial career point of view, is that ability to experience all of those things with different cultures and etc. The mining industry generally has been a more male-dominated industry, but I think is changing quickly. And I think there is the recognition that we do need to change. And I think finance can really play a leading role in that. So probably, the last 20 years, finance numbers through universities have probably been pretty much 50-50. And we're certainly seeing that reflect up through the finance function. And so, in some ways we have an easier starting point, but because we don't have some of those natural history and barriers. And so I think we can lead the way. But we can always do better. So, we're having a discussion at the moment about how we make sure we are seeing females in particular grow into more senior roles, and how we can attract back females after they do step out, if they're having families and those sort of things. How can we stay in touch? How do we set up more flexible working environments so that people can cope? But it's also a challenge on the male side as well, right? Because these things are often partnerships, and so we also need to have that discussion from and accept those things from a male point of view, also playing roles in a family environment. And I suppose the one thing I always encourage people to do is to think about how you're going to set yourself up to be successful. So does that mean you're doing the morning handover shift or the evening handover shift, etc.? Whatever works for different people, and different setups do work differently for different couples and families. Try to set yourself up so you're going to be successful and not overly stressed in the way that you're trying to run late for meetings or get out early of an evening. I think people do recognise that you need to strike a balance on that front. I'd like to think there isn't, because it's certainly not something that we consciously set out to do. If anything, I would say, a core principle of what we do is that, everyone that comes to work at Anglo should be paid fairly for the skills that they bring to the table. So I'd love to think that's live within the organisation, but we do need to look through the organisation and make sure that's in fact how it's playing out. In some respects, the skills haven't changed that much, but how you apply them has probably changed, and the environment that you're applying them in has probably sped up with data and media flows and all that sort of thing. So some of the same challenges exists today. How you communicate and get your messages out in a large, complex organisation is a challenge, even with modern technology. Yes, you have tools available that you probably didn't have in days gone by, but having those skills and being able to influence across the organisation is probably one of the biggest challenges. We're conscious of our responsibilities in terms of how we secure our data, and we want to play a responsible role in how we do that. I'd love to think we're fully compliant with all the current regulations, with policies and practices that we have across the organisation, but we're aware that they're changing. We have a project team in charge of looking at that to make sure that we will transition and comply with the new rules. Anglo's been really, I suppose, focused and working on a number of areas over the last 3 years. So it's been about getting the balance sheet right and really strong so that we can set the company up for a very high value future. It's really about costs and making sure that we're positioning ourselves at the right point in the cost curve. And then it's about all the other things, returns to shareholders, sustainability, communities, the way we work in the environment that we work in. So for me, my initial focus has been building on those building blocks that have been put in place. I think then over time you gradually influence those and put your own stamp and thought process as you grow and become part of the organisation. So right now it's really about building on those building blocks and then continuing to deliver results, and then communicating to the marketplace how we're going to take the company forward in terms of capital allocation, returns to shareholders, etc. In some ways it is building on those building blocks that we've put in place, but emerging as a leader in technology and innovation. I think cementing our position from a cost and a value point of view. We will have demonstrated at that point consistent returns to shareholders and an appropriate sort of pursuit of growth where it makes sense to do so. So I think if we can deliver on all of those aspects, that value should translate obviously ultimately into share price and to shareholders. Achieving all of that is a challenge in the world that we live in, and one of the great privileges that we have working in the mining industry is that you do have the opportunity to positively impact on communities and regions and countries, but that also comes with a great responsibility as you impact on communities and regions and countries. And I think we have an incredible opportunity to build off the great history that the company's had and really set it up for the next 100 years and doing those things well. I think clarity and simplicity, and I know that's a hard thing to synthesise down when you actually then have to communicate the strategy and the results, but if you consistently deliver and then consistently set out the path forward and deliver against that, that's really, as a management team, I think one of the best compliments you can get when you go to see shareholders and the first comment they make is, congratulations, you've done exactly what you said you would do. That's one of those rare things in an executive's life that if you can do that consistently, I think really sets the company up to deliver value long term. I think the challenge is that there's so much financial data. How do you synthesise that down for the circumstances and then marry it up with the other things that are happening across your environment and landscape? And mining is a great example of that, where you've got to be thinking as you're making, whether it be investment decisions, operating decisions, whatever it may be, not only the things that you can control, but the external things that you can't. And whether that be policy decisions in China around environment that impacts iron ore, Brexits and fiscal policies and those sort of things, you've got to be able to weigh those risks up and think your way through that, and I suppose successfully navigate that as you deliver and think about investment decisions in particular. Probably coping with volatility. And you know, setting up that mindset in an industry that has traditionally been quite cyclical, that you've got to be able to manage through the cycles, not get overly carried away when prices are good, and not get too despondent when prices aren't as strong, because of the work that you've done and the things that you've delivered. And I think if you can do that off a strong balance sheet and a strong cash position, and off a balanced view of the world, then I think that really helps to set you up for success. I think there's probably two levels to that answer. So one is in the operating space. You know, that's becoming more and more obvious in what we're doing, and whether that's through automation, process control, etc. But then how the operating systems and that data talks to the financial systems is also really important. And things are moving so fast in that space that sometimes I think it's a challenge for finance areas to keep up with that. And so being nimble in that space I think is going to become very, very important. And then being selective in how you interpret and use that data. I think the same challenge exists from the 1970s today. You know, you can either print out a big computer printout that you used to do and you know, put it on someone's desk and say, well, there's the answer. Or you can interpret that and put an A4 page on someone's desk and say, well, here's the 5 main points and here's how we're thinking the answer is. So that same challenge exists today. It's just that the data's in more of an electronic form. But the challenge, I think, for the financial community is to add value in exactly that same way. I think you've got to enjoy what you're doing. And that's something I can honestly say. I really love what I do. You need to have fun with it, and I think you need to, obviously, you know, you work hard, you look to try to set your own goals and achieve what you need to, but you really need to gather good people around you. And that doesn't mean it's the same people all the time, because if anything, I think you need to challenge yourself to be able to do what you do in different environments. But you can't do it all yourself. And so to have a good team of people around you, to influence and understand the industry that you're working within and look way beyond the numbers, I think that would be the best advice I could give anybody. Absolutely. I think people skills are paramount and becoming more and more, I think, a requirement of core financial jobs, particularly for CFOs. You know, I would spend 90% of my day listening and talking as opposed to looking at numbers and data. And I think that probably increases as you move up through an organisation. So being able to influence, whether it be through the finance team so that you can enable them to influence out through the organisation, or whether it's through your own personal influence, the ability to communicate, to motivate, and to bring your skill set and personality to the role is really important. Maybe best to ask other people, but hopefully they would say, you know, very transparent, straightforward, honest, decisive, fair, enjoys a laugh while he works hard. I would like to think people would say those things about me. I find that most of the teams are really self-motivating from that respect. You know, you don't need to tell people, you know, just stay back and work to get things done. If you're recruiting and employing the right people, and importantly, if you build the right culture in an organisation, then I think some of those things almost take care of themselves, because people sign on to what it is you're trying to do. And so I think as a CFO, you know, bringing your own skill set and personality and set of values to the culture is probably the most important thing you can do. To then let that reflect out through the organisation and through your team. I think in the mining industry particularly, you've got to accept the fact there'll be ups and downs. So it's actually not those things. To me, it's a surprise that you should have not let be a surprise. So being in control of the things you should be in control of. One of the examples I use sometimes through my own teams is that, you know, if I have 120 people working for me across all the different divisions, and each one of them made a mistake once every 10 years, I would have a mistake consolidating up every single month that we reported the numbers. And so it's that level of attention to detail, to quality, that that I need them to take pride in, and I need to be able to rely on to have confidence in how I then represent myself, the division and the company, both internally and externally. I think really it's about continuing the journey, both for me personally and for Anglo American, and for me progressively settling into the role, influencing the strategic direction and how the company's run and how you have a level of influence in it. I think the days of having a deep and narrow finance division are long gone. You need that, but you also need to be able to influence across the organisation. And I'd love to think that over time, some of what I bring to the role and to the company will influence the organisation quite broadly. I'm not sure there's one thing. I think being yourself is probably one of the core things I would answer in that respect. To be anything else won't be sustainable. But I also think not being afraid to bring and express the values that you bring as a person and into the role is really important as well. Because I think setting up the right culture and then employing the right people within that culture will achieve a lot of what you need to achieve personally. So if you can get those things right, a lot of other things almost take care of themselves and makes your life and your job a lot easier.